Unsyndicated presents Shep and Sean, featuring Matt Shepard and Sean Baligian.
What is up? Happy Labor Day. Do you say that? Happy Labor Day. I hope you're enjoying Labor Day. How does that work?
Yeah, I don't think so, but it works. It works for you. I mean, anytime you say happy, fill in the blank. Happy, brat day. I don't care. It works for you. I'm good with that.
It was brat
day. Yeah. It's always a brat day at the Baligian household.
Can I tell like the people out there what
Please.
I did? 'Cause I was actually proud. This is something that I legitimately came up with myself. So I have a bunch of brats and sausages in the house, and I literally said, how about I grill just a whole bunch of good evening, Chris? How about I grill a whole bunch of brats, and I'm going to cut them into thirds, cut each brat in a third, and put them like on a slider bun with just some grilled onions. And Shep, man, it hit. Like it like I think for the foreseeable future, that's how I'm probably going to down my brats. I got to be honest with you.
I will tell you this, in the very future, I'm going to have Todd and Blake rename you on the show we do, and it's going to call Tease. It's just going to be Tease.
Right.
Tease, just tease, because that's what you do. Like, you do a good job of teasing our advertisers, but the worst thing you do is tease everybody out there with your grilling stories, and then we don't get any. So we can call you Tease. We can call you SOB because you don't want to share. There's a lot of things we can call you right now because of that.
Fits. What did you do this weekend? Everybody that you have the clan in town. You do anything?
I went with some friends on a boat ride last night and watched some fireworks on a place called Pine Lake. Really enjoyed that very much. And then Friday I was in East Lansing. Really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. Love the atmosphere. I get that it's Florida Atlantic, Sean, but I don't care what anybody says. The first day, there's a few days in our sports calendar because we all love them, right? We all love all the seasons, but there are a few days that they're really special, and obviously opening day is one of them for baseball. But college football season opener. When you're out there for where I was on Munn Field, looking around and you're seeing all the green and white canopies and tents and walking down the sidewalk and have so many people, hey, you want a hot dog? Hey, you want a brat? I've just sliced it into 3 and I put them on buns with fried onions and mustard. All those different things where everybody seems to be happy and friendly and you're a neighbor. You're all there for that school. It was pretty cool. And then Saturday night, some friends came over and we watched the Michigan game together. So it was a pretty good weekend of football for sure.
I was really bummed because normally I'm up there like you on the first Spartan game. I've always loved the Friday tradition. I started the Boise State year, and it just every year, and especially now with my daughter up there, would have been great to be up there. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I had the doubleheader. But Shep, I'm a firm believer in games like this, whether it be Michigan State just coming away with a victory or whether it be Michigan and people going, oh, I don't know. I think there's nothing good that comes out of these games against Florida Atlantic or Fresno or South Florida or anything like that. There's 3 possible things. Number 1, if you win big, everybody goes, yawn, you're supposed to.
Right.
Number 2, if it's closer than anybody thinks, people goes, ooh, are you married? When do you think now? And then, of course, the third is if you lose, it's the end of your program and you may as well give yourself the death penalty like SMU. So there's nothing good. You are not going to please people in games like this. So you know what I say? Find a way to win the game. Find a way to win the game. And people are going to draw their conclusions out of it. I've heard it for so many years now. No big deal. Both teams are 1-0. Okay, good.
Me too. That's exactly how I feel. I said there's probably 3 games this first weekend where somebody could have really impressed you. overall. Okay. So you look at, I mean, maybe 4 with Miami and Florida. Okay. But obviously, Georgia really impressed you beating Clemson. We don't know how
Sure.
good Clemson is.
Mhm.
Okay. Maybe Clemson's down. Who knows? Roddy White thinks they're losing for a reason, which is pretty funny. So that's one of them. That's one of the games. USC beating LSU just before Brian Kelly starts to pout and pound his fist on the microphone and the table. And overall, that's about it, right? I mean, there's not many other games where you're going, wow, now that was something else. Like I watched Penn State and West Virginia. Okay, Penn State looked pretty good. I mean, did Drew Allard look like the second coming of an All-American quarterback at Penn State? Not necessarily, but it's a nice win. I think the only thing that comes from it for Michigan State and Michigan is from a coaching and a player standpoint, they highlight what they can improve upon. Michigan's offensive line has got to be a little bit stronger. Their passing game's got to get a little bit better. Michigan State, you'd like to see them cut down on the penalties. Those are all things that are very correctable. And going into both of these teams in week 2 big games for both of them, not must wins, but I think pretty telling games. Then, yeah, I mean, that's about it. You win and you move on. That's as best as you can put it.
Yeah. Eric says, what's up, guys? A big test for Michigan. And I agree, big test for both teams. I thought both offensive lines just left you wanting more. Yep. But I will say this. I remember in particular, Shep, the 2013 season for Michigan State. I got killed by people because they had a less than performance against Western Michigan. Followed that up with what might be the worst college football game I've ever seen with my own 2 eyes. And they played South Florida and won 21-6. And people are going, this is the end of D'Antonio. This is it. Ha ha, Sparty, giggle, giggle. And then I know what happened after that. And so do you. They went and dominated the Big Ten Conference, beat everybody by double digits, won a Rose Bowl. People put too much into this. What did I learn about both of these teams, Shep? I was telling Blake the other night. Nothing. I didn't learn anything. A lot of the questions that I had were still in place. I think this is a good Michigan team. I don't think they're anywhere near last year. Nope. They definitely don't have a quarterback. I think the Michigan State margin of error is razor thin. The only thing, I thought that Childs would be further along than he is. He's not there. And that doesn't mean that he's not going to be there. Right. But you brought up USC. Blake and I were talking about this last night. We were texting each other. USC actually looks like for the first time in years they have a even like manageable defense. I mean, how often did you see them with absolutely no defense the last few years, right?
I thought they looked super fast against LSU. Okay, you're talking about on turf against a really fast LSU team. I thought they looked really fast. The only thing I would disagree with on the Michigan State and Michigan. So Michigan's defense, you and I talked about this a few weeks back. I said Michigan's defense will be as good, if not better, than it was a year ago. I know a lot of people felt like, oh, my God, how is that possible? It may not be as deep, but I think their defense will be as good, if not better, than a year ago. They held Fresno State to 9 yards of rushing. That's impressive. I don't care who you're playing. Holding a team to 9 yards rushing is something pretty good. I'd like to see their offensive, passing attack be a little bit more in tune, like you said. So we'll see what happens at the quarterback position. Michigan State, I thought, ran the ball pretty well. Okay. They had decent pressure, but the 12 penalties are alarming. Okay. Huge. That's something that was a serious problem for them a year ago. I'm not a big believer that every penalty means you're undisciplined. I think there are some penalties that you make that don't necessarily tell me you're undisciplined. Maybe a holding call every once in a while when a guy's got you beat. But some of those penalties where you're leading with the crown of your helmet, and you're getting, roughing penalties, or you're getting unsportsmanlike penalties, or you're getting ejected for targeting. I mean, those are undisciplined penalties.
Sure.
And I think they can be corrected, no problem. But I mean, those are some of the things that I think you witness, and you learn a little bit about your team, and then you move on. So let's see how the Michigan State does against Maryland. That might be a little bit more telling sign. And obviously Michigan will have a much bigger test against Texas, because Texas is really good too.
Our mutual friend Jack Ebling brought up a point to me. He was talking about he went back to 2011, and who can forget the Golston, Lewan, that disaster where Michigan State beat Michigan by 2 touchdowns, and Michigan State was just so sloppy. I mean, they really were. And Mark D'Antonio said, I guarantee you we aren't going to see anything like that the next week. The next week was the Keith Nickel. Remember the Hail Mary?
Yes.
Michigan State had no penalties that day.
Yeah. There you go.
You nailed it. That is correctable stuff.
Yeah.
That's I'm going to say to you, I think Michigan State doesn't have much depth. I think Jonathan Smith, that's something that he's going to have to do, and that's something. Somebody said, I think Michigan State's going to get to 6 wins, but where? And this is where we have to play more of the schedule game than we have in the past, because you mentioned Penn State. I don't think Penn State's very good, Shep, but take a look at their schedule.
I was just going to say that. Yeah,
they just sleepwalk to 10 wins, sleepwalk to 10 wins.
Yeah.
Michigan State has at Maryland, Prairie View, which should be win number 2, at BC. Certainly could be win number 3. Ohio State in East Lansing, at Oregon.
That 4-game stretch is murderous.
And then you got Indiana at home. You're at Illinois, Purdue at home, Rutgers at home.
Yeah.
There could be 6 wins there.
Sure. That's why I said the Maryland game, I think, might make me sway. If they win that game, I could think they could get 7 wins. If they don't beat Maryland, then I still think I see them getting 6. Now, Nick said some of those calls Friday were weak. The quarterback was sliding crazy late. I didn't think so. You can tell when the quarterback is giving himself up. There's a couple in the first half, including the one where the player was ejected. There's no doubt about it. Come on, man. I mean, this is the stuff they're trying to take out of the game. You have to look at things realistically, without emotion, okay? And as much as you want them to win, and I wanted them to win too, I'm watching that game. I'm like, come on, man. I mean, that is blatantly obvious. I mean, you cannot do what they were doing. And if it was your quarterback, if it was Childs, I would say the same damn thing about the other team. I don't care what uniform they're playing under. You just can't do it, right? I mean, but look, that's over with. We'll see what happens. My guess is they will be much more prepared, much better against Maryland. I would expect them to be. Here's what I loved. I loved Childs after the game taking ownership of it.
Yep.
You know what? I mean, he says, look, that's on me. I've got to be better. I love that stuff. This is an 18-year-old kid. Doesn't have a lot of, there's no starts under that belt, right? For him to go out there and do what he did and struggle the way he did and turn it over the way he did and still get the win and give everybody credit and say, I'm going to be better next time. It's on me. That's good leadership, I think, to start.
You know what's interesting? Bill said, happy Labor Day, all happy Labor Day. David said USC is at 3 in the Big Ten right now. I'm going to be intrigued to see, because I'll say it again in case you're just joining us. What jumped out to me was USC actually showing some defense. Yeah. Because if you've watched USC the last few years, I mean, poor Caleb Williams. I mean, he better score every gosh damn drive, because that defense let them out. And I don't know how good USC is. And let me tell you why. Because it's Brian Kelly and LSU in week 1. And we were just joking about this before the game. And seriously, I mean, like, BK blows his mind and he's pounding the table saying, I don't know why this keeps happening. I do.
Yeah.
I've seen it a few times. I mean, hey, if the names are changing, okay, especially is apt to happen, Shep, in this new college football world, but the same kind of results are happening. One has to ask themselves, what is the common denominator each year? I mean, for whatever reason, he's not getting his team ready for these games.
I get it, man. Absolutely. I mean, you're still beating LSU. They still got really good athletes, but, you know, from a coaching standpoint, I'm with you. You and I both interviewed him when he was at Grand Valley, when he was at Central. Then he goes to Cincinnati, then he goes to Notre Dame. I think it's a really cool way to build your way up. Like the same thing happened with Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer, Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, Ohio State, taking those steps, right? Brian Kelly taking the steps that he took from Division II to Mid-American Conference. Then you go to Cincinnati. I think it's a really cool story. He's not likable. He's just not a likable guy. They do silly things. You had a tweet yesterday where it showed the video of him, remember, doing that stuff. I mean, at some point, you're a coach. It makes you look stupid. Yeah. Just don't do that. I got an idea. Let's put you on a spinning wheel with one of your players and put some flashing lights, and you can do your best Denny Terrio impersonation. If I'm Brian Kelly, why? This isn't about me. It's about the program. put me next to, the mascot Mike. Put me in the eye of the tiger in the middle of the football field. Don't do stupid things like that. You just open yourself up for ridiculous commentary after that.
Bill asks, does the GLIAC have replay for targeting? They do not. By the way, GLIAC, at least my portion of it, we're going to be in Tiffin on Thursday night. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice.
In Tiffin. So
okay.
That's a good thing. Eric said, if we lose it, won't be a lot. But what do you mean? Which are you? Obviously, Eric, you're a Michigan fan. What do you mean? If you lose it, it won't be by a lot.
In other words, if they lose to Texas, it's going to be a close game, is what he's saying.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I didn't know if he was talking. Yeah, because I didn't know if he was talking about Texas or he was talking about USC because USC was up. Listen, my opinion, I saw a couple people, Rhino made a comment, a couple people said to me, all right, I thought 9-3, maybe 8-4 for Michigan now with USC looking the way they did. We'll wait and see how it plays out. It's okay to say, like, it's funny, I guess, because I'm wearing this hat. Surely it must be that I'm biased against Michigan. You're the national champion. Everybody and their brother knew you were going to take a step back this year.
Yeah.
Right? Shep, there's no surprise there. No surprise.
Yeah. You're first of all, hell of a schedule, right? Hell of a conference. You're not going undefeated like you were. I don't care what school you root for, and I don't care what conference you play in. You lose your head coach, your starting quarterback, your starting running back, your entire offensive line, some key guys from defense. Most people would take a step back. I don't care what conference you're playing in or whatever. So I think that's bound to happen. Now, 8-4 would surprise me. I think it's closer to 9-3, 10-2. But we'll see. I'm not going to judge, like you said. I'm not judging. I'm not coming to a conclusion. Let's put it that way, because we can judge, right? We can see what a team needs to get better at. I'm not coming to any conclusion about any team after week 1. I may not even come to that conclusion after week 2. I mean, you told that story earlier. It's ridiculous. Let them dive into conference play. Let's see if this is a team, either team gets a little bit better while going forward. Look, you and I would guess going into the game against Maryland, considering what Maryland did a year ago, that Michigan State would be an underdog against the Terps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they've lost some talent too, including their quarterback. So let's see what happens. We've got to understand, and I'm sure most people do, Michigan State's got 61 new players, folks. 61. They've got I know, it's insane. You got an 18-year-old quarterback. They're all trying to get used to one another. They're trying to get used to a new system, a new surroundings, new teammates, the whole thing. So I'm gonna reserve a little judgment. I think you started to say this a moment ago. Maybe I could be wrong. It's almost like in today's world, if you don't come out with an opinion after seeing somebody right away, that you don't belong in a conversation.
Yeah.
People are afraid to say it's okay to wait a week or two.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's going to be interesting. I saw a couple people. David said he sees 7-5 for Michigan. Now, Chris said, I don't mind taking a step back, but 8-4 would be disappointing. Same. Oregon, Ohio State. I mean, this is the price that you pay when you see the contracts, or excuse me, the conferences going to where they are right now. You got Oregon, you got Ohio State, you got Texas, and now maybe you have USC.
Yeah.
I mean, that's dangerous stuff. And so you compare that schedule to the joke of a schedule that Penn State has, and sometimes looks can be deceiving. And one of the things that we don't know is, how is the committee going to take a look at that? How is the committee going to take a look at that? If there's a 9-3 Michigan and Penn State sitting there at 10-2, or God forbid 11-1, with paying a cake schedule, how are they going to take a look at that? And I don't know the answer to it. This is all uncharted territory for us, Shep, and that's what makes this year so incredibly intriguing.
Yeah, this is Bill says a good one. Blake Underwood, I think he meant Bryce Underwood. Cannot arrive fast enough for BK. In case people are wondering, he's the kid out of Belleville. They've played for 3 state championships. He's won 2 of them. He'll be Mr. Football this year. He's arguably the number 1 quarterback in the country. They were easy winners in week 1, and they are favored to win Division I state title again this year, and he's going to LSU. And could have gone anywhere he wanted to. It'll be interesting to see how quickly he gets in. Was Niedermeyer the problem, or Nussmeier rather? Was Nussmeier the problem at quarterback for LSU? I don't know if that was necessarily the case, but we'll see.
I saw Underwood. We had his game Friday, Shep, and if people haven't seen him before, I this is going to sound like a weird thing. It reminds me of Randy Moss. And I'll tell you why it reminds me of Randy Moss. Because Randy Moss could be running and it doesn't look like he's going fast and he's blowing past everybody. Yeah. And that's the way Bryce Underwood moves. I mean, forget the arm. I mean, the arm could do what the arm could do. But when he takes off running, you're just like, he's not moving fast and then he's blowing past everybody. He looks like it's a complete different gear. He is easy speed is a good way to put it. No doubt about that.
Yeah, I've called his state championship game in each of the last 3 years. His freshman and sophomore year were super impressive. Last year, losing to Southfield A&T, and the Southfield A&T quarterback was a hell of an athlete. Like he was really good. Underwood was really good too. He didn't play up to what many people would have considered the team or his potential on that day at Ford Field. But look, I don't give a crap who you're talking about. You don't get to be the number one player at your position in the country if you're not good enough. You and I have a good friend, Mark Spindler, was the number one defensive tackle in the country when he was coming out of high school and went to Pitt. The same year, Emmitt Smith was the offensive player, best offensive high school player in the country. I don't know if Underwood's going to get that type of recognition. I just know he's highly sought after. And when everybody wants you, that means you've got to be pretty damn good.
Our buddy, Mr. Positive, said good chemistry. Mr. Positive, Detroit Radio, National Radio, and TV. Appreciate you, man. Hey, Shep, I want to talk about making a judgment on a player too quickly. Good, bad, and sometimes indifferent. Because I have an example, one that popped in my head, and I hope you remember this. But let me tell you about our friends at Legacy. Did you know that thousands of Metro Detroiters have already called Legacy Partners to get help with their home and auto insurance? Our friends at Legacy Partners are one of Southeast Michigan's top independent insurance agents. They provide a full-service, one-stop solution for all of your insurance needs, personal and business, large and small. Legacy has helped our listeners by fixing mistakes other agents have made, asking the right questions to get the right coverage put in place to properly protect you. And yes, help save you money. Doesn't everybody want to do that right now with our economy? Chances are, if you haven't checked your policies in the last year, you're probably paying too much and you could be underinsured. Enter Legacy Partners. Give them a chance to help with your home, your cars, life insurance, Medicare enrollment, or your business insurance needs. Call them today, 586-209-4106. That's 586-209-4106, or visit legacypartnersins.com to get started with your new quotes. I'm going 30 years ago, but I don't give a crap. Charlie Ward. Yes, most of you might remember him as a basketball player with the New York Knicks. Sure. Shep, everybody and their brother was drooling over how great this Charlie Ward was, and he was going to replace Casey Weldon, and he was going to be the next great quarterback at Florida State. And I remember he came in, it was the 92 season, and Shep, I remember laughing at some of my buddies who were big. I'm going, this is a guy that I've heard so much about. He's awful. Like, stop it. I'm never going to listen to you again. Well, the funny thing can happen. I don't know if you know this. Development is real. Yep. And that was a lesson for young Sean, because this kid went from this quarterback in 92 to, no doubt about it, Heisman Trophy winner the next year. And that's the one thing. I mean, Shep, we've seen it time and time again. Now, it doesn't mean that it happens for everybody. Some guys it doesn't happen for. But I think, a guy is highly recruited for a reason. And enough eyes look at this guy, and not for what he is in that moment, but what he could potentially be. And that's why I think sometimes it's too early to kind of count a guy out, so to speak.
Yeah, I think we forget that, there's an adjustment for everybody, whether it be to the collegiate game or to the professional game. I was listening to Steve Sarkisian a little bit after the game that Texas had, and people were asking a lot about Arch Manning, and he's talked about how much better he is already. I mean, just physically and mentally, and it's a huge challenge. I'll use the example of Darius Slay. Darius Slay, when he was drafted by the Lions in the second round, he comes to Detroit and he struggled. You and I covered him. He struggled as a rookie. Well, you know what? They figured out what his strengths and weaknesses were at the NFL level, where he was most comfortable. Suddenly he became a Pro Bowler. You would argue a couple of years ago, and maybe even last year, but I would say at least a couple of years ago, he was one of the best cover corners in all of football. And many people would have given up on him in Detroit after his first season. Peyton Manning set an NFL rookie record for number of touch or interceptions. I don't know how many people are willing to give up on him, but there's an adjustment there, I think is what you're saying. So it's a really good point. Somebody said, Sean, are you taking Randy Moss? You're taking Terry Fair over Randy Moss, right? Well, look, obviously that was a massive mistake by the Lions. Correct me if I'm wrong here. Randy Moss was drafted 21st. There were 20 teams, but 19 additional teams, including Detroit, 20 with Detroit, who chose to pass on Randy Moss. And all those teams passed on, I believe, Alan Faneca was also in that draft. He's a Hall of Famer too. So you and I didn't like the Terry Fair draft. I remember thinking, who the hell is this guy, right? People, he can return punts. I don't care. I don't want my first round pick to return punts. I want my first round pick to play every down, right? And the Lions screwed up, obviously, but a lot of teams screwed up too.
Randy Moss was an asshole. I mean, like, honestly, there's no
Without
other way
a
to
doubt.
say that. I mean,
Without a doubt.
he was in that, like Bill said, it scared a lot of people off. And it's funny, Shep, I did one of those NFL films things because I saw Randy when he was at Marshall. I think you did too.
I did, yep.
And we played them back-to-back. Toledo played them back-to-back years in the Mid-American Conference Championship. I remember telling my buddies, you got to see this guy. He's a freak. And they said to me, well, who's covering him? Come on, it's some kid from Toledo. And I go, the kid's name's Clarence Love, and I guarantee you he's going in the NFL draft. He went in the third round to the Raiders. But that's how dominant he was. But as you know, when you do things like that, you have to do these interviews with him. I've never met a bigger asshole. I'm serious. And they use that on the NFL films thing, and they bleeped it out. But they were talking to, I think the title was called Divas and whatever the show was and everything. I said, I've never met a bigger asshole. And
I remember.
I think Randy would admit that now. Like Randy in his early career was an asshole.
If he's going to be honest, he would. I mean, he's probably the last guy I would have thought would have been a member of the media. I remember when he was in Minnesota, he came to the Silver Dome and had a big game against the Lions, which shouldn't surprise anybody. So I'm waiting by his locker, like other members of the media were. And he comes sauntering out of the shower and he starts MFing us and starts swearing at us. And what the hell are you guys waiting for? What are you guys looking for? And nobody said a thing. And finally, I just said, well, I'm not waiting to watch you get dressed. I can tell you that. What do you think we're waiting for? You just scored 3 touchdowns or whatever it was. You're right. He was a complete jerk, but he was one of the greatest players you've ever seen play that position. That doesn't give him any excuse to act the way he did. I'm just verifying Sean's story, and Sean's correct. But he still is a hell of a football talent.
I would put him up there with anybody I ever saw. And I would even take it a step further. I bet you there's part of Randy that says, wow, I bet you I could even have been more. He was that talented. He really was. He was, if you're talking about just pure Shep, my goodness gracious, there are guys that you have to put Jerry Rice on a pedestal. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And Randy Moss belongs on that pedestal. He was phenomenal. Taking nothing away from the guy's talent. Both things can be true. A guy can be an utter ass and be a phenomenal player, right? Yeah. And he was a phenomenal player.
Yeah, there's been a lot of players in every sport like that.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt about that. Let's see. Lawrence Phillips, Eagles bust Randy Moss, Hall of Famer, big risk, big reward, draft picks. Eric said Shep remembers 3rd and 24. Do you remember 3rd and 24? Randy Moss caught a pass on 3rd and 24. Eric made reference to it a few weeks ago.
I'm sure there's a lot of 3rd and 24s where Randy Moss, burned somebody. But Eric can remind me. By the way,
wasn't there a famous 3rd and 27 that the Lions gave up to the Eagles? For some reason, that one sticks out.
Yeah, right. Lomas Brown probably shouldn't have made that prediction. By the way, Boston College leads Florida State 14-0.
The revenge tour. It's the revenge.
Somebody had mentioned that, and Blake says Florida State minus 1605 is DOA.
Jeez. What a disaster. Their quarterback's no good. I'm sorry. I know DJ's popped all over the place, but I've seen him enough to just go sorry. I'm not feeling it with that guy. He was awful in that game over in Ireland. Awful. Just terrible. Hey, listen, let's talk about our friends at the Wealth Advantage Group. And if you are ready to take charge of your financial future, well, then look no further than the Wealth Advantage Group, located in historic downtown Northville, owned by those two guys right there, the Hanson brothers, with over 20 years of industry experience. They understand that your financial goals are as unique as you are. That's why they offer personalized expert guidance to help you navigate the complexities of financial planning. Now, whether you're saving for retirement, getting ready to sell your company, already in retirement, they can help guide you through every step of your financial journey. They work with clients throughout all stages of life and have clients in over 20 different states. Look, the investment world is a complex one. So if you're ready to start taking your finances more seriously, it might be time to work with the experts. Reach out to the Wealth Advantage Group at 248-773-8574 or visit their website at www.thewealthadv.com. Shep, that's a good question. I hope that you aren't afraid to answer it. I've never even thought about it. There are a few that come to mind, but I'll think about it. Okay. Jerry asked, who's the biggest jerk that played here in Detroit? Morris, Lambier, Brett Hull. I'll hang up and listen. I thought Brett Hull was awesome.
I thought Lambier was the biggest jackass, but he didn't care. I don't suppose anybody needed to care. I didn't think Rasheed Wallace was a great guy to deal with either.
No.
In going out to practice and having him treat people the way he did. But I would say Lambier would win that.
Is there somebody else that comes to mind? I have a few guys that come to mind. I have a few guys that come to mind. When Mike Babcock was in his moods, because sometimes Mike was a really nice guy, and Mike was a really nice guy away from the rink.
He is, really was.
But and I stand by that. But when Mike was in his moods, I saw him just turn jackass for absolutely no reason on people.
Look, I mean, Scotty Bowman wasn't always the greatest guy to deal with. It depends on your relationship. I remember making a statement to Scotty Bowman. It wasn't in a form of a question. So I'm right at his desk and I ask him, hey, I forget exactly what it was, but he says, what is it with you? All you do is ever make statements. What the hell's wrong with you? Why don't you ask a question? Ask a question. So ask the question. He goes, no, next question. So, I was in Fred Human and I were in St. Louis standing next to each other in a playoff series. And he just starts all of a sudden, this is the morning skate. Pucks are coming our way. And I look at Fred, I said, is he shooting pucks at us? And Fred goes, I believe he is. And I truly believe Scotty Bowman was just shooting pucks at us.
He did that on purpose.
Oh, of course I did.
I was fortunate. I kept in touch with him a little bit. It's been a few years, but I've kept in touch with him. He knew what he was doing. He did. Sure. He knew what he was doing. Somebody said Jason Hansen. No. Not Jason Hansen. He's at the complete other end of the spectrum. He's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy.
There are some guys, and it doesn't mean they're jerks, by the way, because I always take this into account. We're members of the media. It's not like we're buddies. Okay. They don't always trust us, and I don't necessarily blame them. We seem to only be there when we need something. So I get all that. Chris Spielman's a friend of mine. Covering him as a player was not easy. I mean, he was
Killed me.
challenging,
He
right?
made me poo myself. I did. I had poo in my pants.
Oh, your
Telling you.
guy. Listen, your guy Steve Eiserman was not always the greatest to deal
He
with.
was not very easy to
Okay?
deal with.
No,
He
right.
was not easy to deal with.
So our friend Art Regner had a great relationship with him, but that doesn't mean everybody did. Keith
Yeah.
Gabe had a pretty good relationship with him. Not everybody did. And I don't hold it against him. I'm just saying those guys can be challenging. Okay. Isaiah Thomas was challenging to deal with. All right. Lambier was just a jerk. You remember covering Bison Daily. Do you remember that? Brian Williams?
Yeah.
He was just a weird dude, right? He wasn't challenging to deal with, but you didn't want to ask him too many questions because he was just out there, man, just out there.
Yeah. No, you know what? I never got to cover Lambier. Bill Lambier, especially at the Jim Rome. Remember the Jim Rome thing? I did keg stands with Bill Lambier. So Bill and I have that. We have that in common.
No.
That was a fun day. No, I'm trying to Shep. I can tell you with Spielman, I was wrong. I was a kid. It was my first year. And one of the lessons, and it's a hard lesson to learn, I asked the right question the wrong way. And he rightfully killed me for it. Look, like in front of everybody. And
do you remember what it was?
Yes, it was who was the running back for Tampa? Lit them up. Was it Eric Rett? I want to say it was Eric Rett, and he had like 120 yards.
Warwick Dunn.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was the 95 season. I want to say it was Eric Rett.
Okay.
And I just asked the question. I was like, what the hell happened in the second half? Something along the lines of that.
Yeah.
And there's a right way to ask a question. There's a wrong way to ask a question. And I asked it the wrong way. And I openly admit it. And you know what, to his credit, Chris kind of came up to me a few minutes later and said, I kind of jumped on you. And I said, I kind of asked a dumb question. And then he kind of explained some things to me that'll stay between us. And that was that. Yeah. I'm almost positive. Gosh, now I'm going to look it up, Shep. I'm almost positive it was Eric Rett. Yeah, I'm almost positive it was Eric Rett.
I'll give you another one. Rick Carlisle. And I just did not seem to see eye to eye.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was in Seattle. I was going to call a Pistons game, and I was getting ready to go on the team bus to go over for morning shoot around.
Real quick, it was Eric Rett.
It was Eric Rett. Okay.
He went nuts that day. It was obviously at the Silverdome, and he went off that day.
25 carries for 144 yards, no touchdowns.
Thank you. And in particular, it was the second half. He just, like, every time he touched the ball, it seemed like he went for 6-7 yards.
Maybe he snuck out of a couple of Chris Spielman tackles too. So,
yeah.
There you go.
Carlisle, really? See, it's kind of weird how that
yeah. So anyway, so real quick,
a lot more than I was.
Well, so real quick, I go to get on the bus because Gregory Kelser was getting on the bus too, and Carlisle literally said, "You're not getting on the bus." I said, "Okay, that's fine." Get back home. I asked a question in a press conference. I think it might have been about Lindsey Hunter, maybe Chucky Atkins. I forget who it was. It was one of the diminutive point guards. And I said something along the lines, hey, some people have not necessarily given, I think it was Chucky Atkins, his due, but he's been really good for you the last 12 games. I had stats to back it up and everything. He said, well, you may not think so, but anybody who follows us thinks so. So he gets done with that. And I said to him, I said, hey, you got a second? I said, do you and I have a problem? Is there an issue that I need to know about? Because it seems like you're kind of misinterpreting some things when I'm trying. He's like, yeah, I just don't like the way you ask questions. I said, really? Oh, so we had a heart to heart, tried to iron it out. A few years later, he goes to Indiana, comes back and looks at me and sticks his hand out to shake my hand. And I looked at his hand and I just asked the question. Oh yeah, you're gonna, hey, listen, you don't treat people that way. Let's be professional. Let's just be men. Take me aside and say, hey, listen, here's the issue. I had one issue in my career, Sean, with John Beilein. One issue early on, overtime game, Iowa, Manny Harris benched. Asked him in a post-game show. I get on the bus. He calls me off the bus and says, and he had a stern talking to me, and we had a discussion, a good open discussion about what we need to talk about, how we need to ask the questions. Didn't tell me what to ask or how to ask them per se, but what we're doing for one another, right? And you got to feel that out with the people you work with. And we never had a problem after that. It's not like he expected soft tosses. There are different ways to ask questions. You know that because you call games too.
I'm telling you, that's where I screwed up with Spielman. The question, I kind of I'll be perfectly honest with you. I asked it as a fan. I know I did. I asked it. I was a disgruntled fan in that moment, as opposed to asking the question the right way, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. And it is the right. So there's a way to ask questions and ask them professionally. And I think there's something to be said for that.
Sometimes they can surprise you, though, because Jerry said now we know why he was called Prick Carlisle. Shep, I'm sure you know this. When he was on his way out of town, he was literally driving to the airport, leaving town. He called the hotline at the station. I was doing a show afterwards, and he said, put me on hold until the break. And so we went to break, and our producer said, Rick Carlisle's on the line. So I got on the phone and talked to him. He goes, hey, can I come on? And I'm like, wait, are you kidding me? Of course you can come on. And I go, can we talk about anything? Let's talk about anything you want. He goes, there are probably going to be some things I can't answer, but talk about whatever you want. And I was actually really surprised by that, Shep, because sometimes, I don't know, maybe it hits them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm just surprised you could pick up the signal at that late at night, which is kind of a rarity.
It was during the day, though. That's a great call. Dude, I lived 10 minutes west of that station, and man, the second the sun went down, I got a better chance listening to a station out of St. Louis than I did from the fan. Are you kidding me? Hey, let's talk about Lindsay Broadwell. When it is time to get yourself a house, whether you're buying, selling, or both, you need to contact the right agent. Who should you contact? Well, I got it. That young lady right there, Lindsay Broadwell. Your house is probably the biggest investment you'll ever make, and that's why you need a pro. Lindsay grew up on the mean streets of Northville and has expanded her team all over Southeast Michigan. She's an expert in all facets of the business. Now, when it's time to move, our friend Lindsay and her team will make sure you get the most out of your house and everything goes smoothly when finding your new home. Buyer, seller, first-time buyer, doesn't matter. She'll help you get everything from start to close. Licensed realtor at Real Broker LLC. Start your search today at BroadwellHomes.com. Now, Shep, I think you'll agree with me. I don't want to be negative Nelly and talk about some difficult ones. Some of the guys that were great to talk to, and I've said Darren McCarty was unbelievable back in the day.
Still is.
I can't tell you how many times I was like, I had to bring back sound for the fan or something, and I would give him the puppy eyes, and he'd go, "All right." Chris Draper was a guy that was good with Maltby. Chris Osgood at times. They were guys that you could get some quotes from, and no doubt about that. Herman Moore, when he was playing, Killer told me the funniest thing. I remember my first year, 95, he told me, Shep, he goes, "Kid, if the Lions win, go to that corner of the locker room." And in that corner of the locker room was where like Herman Moore was. And I think Lomas was down that stretch. And he goes, "And if they lose, go that way." It was Perriman and Benny Blades. Those guys, do you remember they would hold court and MF this franchise in every way imaginable? It was fascinating to hear,
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, Robert, speaking of that team, Robert Porcher was great to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good call.
And I mean, there's a lot of guys Stephen Boyd was fantastic to deal with, right? I mean, Kevin Glover, offensive linemen generally are for the Lions. Jimmy Howard, I thought, was great with the Red Wings. Anytime I wanted to talk to him, even guys today, Dylan Larkin, all those guys for the most part. Tigers, from a Tiger standpoint, look, I mean, and Gibby will be the first to admit it. Gibby was tough. It was challenging when I covered Gibby when he came back as a member of, I think it was the Royals. that was not an easy interview by any stretch. But he's such a great Class A teammate now. But there's a few other. It's not always the stars either. By the way, there's some other guys. I've gotten into it with a few players, and I think it's really important. Look, I think you and I have the same belief. It's a reason why you go in that locker room or that clubhouse on a regular basis, is because if you're going to say something negative, you want them to be able to see your face and be able to say something to you. And I've had plenty of athletes do that with me, and we have a good discussion about it, and they know where I'm coming from and vice versa. Somebody asked about Rodman. Rodman was in Detroit. Rodman was pretty quiet. He was quiet in that locker room. So you would go to him and he was very respectful. John Sally was a hoot, as you can imagine. But Rodman in Detroit was not bad at all. It got a little unique once he left Detroit, that's for sure. I was going to tell you a story about one guy though that kind of I thought was interesting. There was a guy by the name of Daniel Stumpf who pitched for the Tigers.
Stumpf. I remember him, right?
Yeah, good job, George Costanza. Yeah. So he so he got mad at me one time because apparently during the broadcast I was talking a lot about the team they were playing, the Boston Red Sox, who had beaten them rather soundly the night before. So he said to me, he's like, I don't understand why you're wearing that English D on your lapel. And I said, what should it be? He said, it should be, the Boston logo. And I said, why is that? He says, because that's all you did was talk about Boston last night. I said, well, when you lose 10-2 or whatever the score was, it was pretty handled. I said, I've got two choices. I can talk about how bad you are, your team, or I can talk about how good the other team is. And I'm not going to necessarily beat you guys up on a situation like that. I said, what's interesting? Did you hear our open at all, where we talked about how good your bullpen has been recently, and yet the bullpen surrendered most of the runs? He said, yeah, I heard you against the Angels, and all you're doing is talking about Mike Trout. And I said, he's the best player in the world.
Yeah, imagine that.
And I said, he comes to Detroit for a 3-game series once a year. And I said, oh, and by the way, the next night, did you notice we talked about how he went 0 for 4 and we gave your pitching staff so much credit? I said, don't be selective in what you're hearing and what you're listening to. So we had a good discussion. After that, everything was great. Everything was fine after that.
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And, sometimes guys have different perspectives. That's the way it is. Like somebody said, Sergey proved to me you don't want to listen to other people's opinions on players. He was okay by me. Others said he was an a-hole and he wouldn't sign for me. He did 3 different times. Yeah. The funny bit about the Russian players, Shep, I have no problem saying it. I've said it for years. It was amazing when they would decide that they couldn't speak English. That was always a fun bit to me. Like guys that I had heard speak nearly perfect English would suddenly. Do you remember the Pavel Datsyuk face?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Pavel Datsyuk. He's the first one that comes to mind. Yeah,
he was like a babe in the woods. Knock it off! I've heard you.
I would say this too, Sean. When people say, "Well, he signed for me," it's different when you're asking for autographs instead of asking for answers. There's a huge difference. But I don't want to spoil it for anybody. There's no need to do that. You guys like who you like, and you have the experience with those people. Embrace that experience and treasure it. That's all I'm going to say. Just because I may have a negative experience with a player, I may have caught them on a bad day.
Yep.
I may have not asked the question the right way, like Sean was just talking about. That doesn't mean that they're bad people. Now, somebody did say, have any of you been threatened by an athlete or in a professional setting? I can tell you this: at the Palace, Charles Barkley was holding court. And he was complaining about the amount of money owners were making. And of course, everybody in the media was just sitting there with huge ladles, lapping it up. And I said, well, you don't have a problem cashing your check. And everybody went deathly quiet. He gets up. He didn't like it. He goes into the locker room. We go in to talk to other players because you could either talk to him on the floor, and I got a little bit of a shoulder check into the wall. Now, I don't look at that as a threat. I don't look at that as being, bullied or pushed around per se. I just, that's part of the job, and that's the way it goes sometimes.
Shep, you may know this, and I'm not. I'll just to answer your question. I did one time, and it was talked out, and I'm never going to bring it up ever.
Yeah.
And Shep, you may already know the story, but I did one time. Somebody was very mad at me, and I think they let their temper get the best of them. And I think the worst thing you can do is be the guy the little weasel who runs away. Sometimes you have to sit there and take it and just look at them and just not in a confrontational, let's go outside type of way, but one time, just once. And
yeah.
I didn't back from it. I didn't back down from it, but at the same time, I wasn't saying, let's go outside. I'll show you.
Right. Yeah, there's no sense in doing that.
Yeah.
You stand your ground and you say what you believe. And again, as long as you're professional, I think most athletes, if not all, the one thing they want to hear is, if you feel like it's true, they want to know why.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you have to know your proverbial shit in order for you to make that type of statement and stance. And you're not going to sit there and debate them man to man. But what you can do is you can say, here's the reason I believe this. And I think most of them, not all of them, will listen to it.
Trust me, that's why I'm never going to mention the name. But that was pretty much the scenario that happened. And it happened.
So you're telling me I can mention the name, but you can't?
I can't. And I kind of, let me tell you why. I kind of told the guy that there was no need to talk about it. We talked about it. And I know there's one other person that witnessed it, our mutual, or at least knows of it, Terry Foster. And that was that. Just happened, and that's that. Good. It was okay. And it happened pretty much the way I said. This is why I said what I said. And so that's, listen, before we get out of here, they can't get
angry with you then, Sean.
I'm going to tell you in 10 seconds. Okay. As soon as we're done. All About Catering is a full service caterer, graduations, weddings, bridal showers, corporate events, everything you need catering for, from 25 to 4,000 people. All About Catering will take care of you. Customer service and satisfaction is their number one goal. So don't sweat your next big event. Just go to All About Catering, LLC.com today to see their menus and all their 5-star reviews. Give them a call, 586-731-1398. That's 586-731-1398 to get your event started. All right, we got to get out of here. Shep, thank you. Blake, thank you. Todd, thank you. Thank you, most importantly. Shep, can we do Thursday at 11 a.m. before I have to drive off to Tiffin?
You bet.
Okay, God bless
you,
you
buddy.
all.
We'll do that. I'm looking forward to it.
Shep, stay on the line. I'll tell you real quick. In the meantime, peace. We'll see you guys.
Shep and Sean, featuring Matt Shepard and Sean Baligian. Produced by Todd Losey and Blake Matcherzak. Executive produced by Sean Baligian and Todd Losey. Theme song, incidental music, and related sound effects are from Still Alive by Anti-Ghost. Engineering, mixing, and graphic design support provided by the Unsyndicated Podcast team. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all your favorite channels. While you're there, be sure to rate and review the podcast. Call the Unsyndicated hotline at 248-237-3257.